such an important part in this time. Go to my people Israel and say to them to build my temple.
Ja, es ist sehr bedrückend und sehr schlimm, was Martin Luther hier formuliert.
Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, resolved to finish the job as Israel prepares to enter Rafah. The power of a mother's love. Rachel Goldberg brings the plight of the hostages to world leaders. Plus, examining Hamas's strategy to use the hostages to torture a nation and bring about political instability. And tens of thousands at the Western Wall receiving the priestly blessing. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. From the Gaza Strip to the Lebanese border, Israel finds itself fighting on multiple fronts. Here's the latest. Israel is set to go ahead with its plans to take out Hamas in Rafah, despite the disapproval of the Biden administration. Israel is setting up thousands of tents before the military action to provide a sanctuary to keep civilians out of harm's way. The operation also aims to rescue the remaining hostages.
133 hostages are still being held by Hamas in Gaza for over 200 days in inhumane conditions. Until Hamas releases our hostages, the IDF will continue to pursue Hamas everywhere in Gaza. This is an urgent call for action. We will leave no stone unturned in our efforts to find our hostages.
President Biden and the leaders of 17 other nations with hostages in the hands of Hamas have issued a joint statement. It calls on Hamas to accept a ceasefire deal that would see the hostages freed. And on Israel's northern border, the IDF is involved in significant battles with Hezbollah. This week, Israel hit Hezbollah with dozens of airstrikes. Israel's defense minister says over the course of the war, Israel has killed many of Hezbollah's top people.
Half of the Hezbollah commanders in southern Lebanon have been eliminated. These are the people who were responsible for the offensive actions, the will to harm the citizens of the State of Israel.
In the U.S., administrators are still dealing with the pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses, which are sometimes anti-Semitic and pro-Hamas. One driving factor in young people's anti-Israel sentiment appears to be online videos like those on TikTok. Virginia Senator Mark Warner spoke with CBN News about how those posts overwhelmingly favor the Palestinians.
There's been independent analysis done that shows on TikTok the amount of pro-Palestinian posts are 54-1 over pro-Israel posts. Now, I'll acknowledge American youth might be split 80-20 pro-Palestinian, but they're not split 54-1.
But Christians are showing their support for Israel. Worship leader Sean Foyt and other Christians gathered to march near the Columbia University campus Thursday evening. Foyt told CBN's Billy Hollowell they chose that location because that's where the campus protest movement started before spreading across the country.
So we want to go to the heart of where this all began and say enough is enough. We are rising up. We're coming to bring the light. We're coming to say we're not going to be pushed around, and we're going to join with our Jewish brothers and sisters.
Adele Raymer is one of the articulate survivors of Kibbutz Nirim, and she spoke yesterday about her experiences with CBN President Gordon Robertson. Take a look.
What's your message to America today? When you see the protests on the college campuses now, what's your message to them?
You know, the people who live where I do are people that were peace-loving and extended their hands in peace, driving Gazans who needed medical aid to hospitals. These are the people that they, for some reason, felt needed to be attacked and slaughtered. When they say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that's a genocidal war cry, and I take them at their word. And America has to be very, very awake now, because the West is next. They're not going to stop with Israel. Their eyes are set on Israel and then much further on. You have to be aware of that.
Well, I'm aware of that. I'm just amazed that, you know, University of Texas, Columbia University, Yale University, these prestigious institutions where people are quite clearly quite intelligent are buying into this. I've got to call it for what I see. It's a lie.
It is a lie, but it's also, you have to understand that when you're in the Middle East, you have to talk Middle East. You can't talk West. All of those people that are protesting out there do not understand how Islamic jihad sees the West and what they intend to do. They're the Nazis of 2024. They want to take over the Western world and bring Sharia law and take over everything that we've built in Israel and that America has built up in America.
It seems on occasion that our own government wants us to somehow buy into that it's not what it professes to be. I'm amazed that they're not calling it out. I get access to Arabic translations, and when they speak in English, they say one thing. When they speak in Arabic, they're saying something completely different. And that message isn't getting across. And it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. President Bush famously said after 9/11 that Islam means peace, and it doesn't. It means submission. And unless you submit to Sharia, they are going to attack you.
You know, I always used to say that I'm sure that the great majority of people on the other side of that fence just want the same thing that I do, to put food on their table, have safety for their children. October 7th changed that for me. I understood that I got my numbers wrong, because it wasn't only the Nukhba that came in, the armed fighters that came into my kibbutz and the communities around. It was the people on the street, men, women, children, all ages, just came in to loot and plunder and destroy. And I'm sitting there with my son holding the handle down, and I'm saying, where are the good Gazans? And I'm in touch with people from Gaza. I've been in the past in touch with people with Gaza and done educational activities with them. With people that I know, we're trying to teach the people, the children, that the people on my side of the border do not want their deaths, do want to collaborate and to communicate and to live as good neighbors. But those people are in the minority. And the Hamas has done such an excellent job at educating an entire generation to hate us.
Well, they've done it with our tax dollars. I mean, that's UNRWA. They run all the schools. So it's that we're just not awake to it. Where's their hope? I think there was some glimmer of hope when Iran sent, it's kind of odd to say there's hope in the middle of a direct attack from Iran, but it seems like the Abraham Accords held. And other nations who do want peace, I think Jordan truly does want peace. They joined with Israel in defending against that attack. Saudi Arabia, to my absolute amazement, said that they went public with it and said, we join with this too. We will not allow this to happen. So is there hope? How do we get to that hope? And I guess, how do you defeat the ideology of hate?
So that Saturday was amazing, that Saturday night when those rockets came over, to see how much help we got and how ineffectual those very frightening rocket attacks were in the end. And the hope, you have to be an optimist to live in Israel. You can't not be an optimist. It doesn't work. So I'm going back home, and I'm going to rebuild, and I'm going to make it bigger and better and more beautiful and more wonderful, and that will be my revenge. That will be my way of getting back to say, terror is not going to run my life.
What a great interview. If you want to be a part of helping Kibbutz Nerim rebuild, there's a website on your screen showing how you can contribute through the Jewish National Fund, USA. And you can also find the link by going to CBN's website. Once there, if you click on Israel and find the page that contains Adele's story, there's a live link there that will take you to the Jewish National Fund website. Up next, Rachel Goldberg appealing to world leaders for the return of the hostages. This week, Hamas released a propaganda video with hostage Hirsch Goldberg Poland. His mom and dad, Rachel and John, said in a statement they were relieved to see him alive. They told their son, "We love you, stay strong, survive." Here is the second part of CBN News' recent interview with Rachel.
Do you feel like the U.S. is doing all that it can to help get your son home?
So we have felt extremely supported and had tremendous access and transparency with what they can share with us from not just the administration, but all of Congress. We've met more than 50 senators at this point. We've met with the president, many governors, and we've met just a tremendous amount of people in the American government who have made it very clear this is a bipartisan issue. There are 8 American families who have hostages still being held. Tragically, 3 are now confirmed no longer alive. Is everyone doing all they can do? I like to think so. I pray that that's the case. I hope that that's the case. I say constantly, hope is mandatory. Hope in this situation is absolutely mandatory. I pray that everything that can be done is being done.
Well, you've been at the UN, you've also met with the Pope. Do you feel like they understand, that they get the situation?
I appreciated when we were talking to Pope Francis and I showed him the video of Hirsch being kidnapped. He said, what you have experienced is terrorism, and terrorism is the absence of humanity. So to me, it was very wise and very empowering and very comforting to hear that. When I spoke at the UN, I try to just tell the story of all of us, all of humanity. We are all suffering right now. I'm very cognizant, and I have always been very careful to talk also about the thousands and thousands of innocent Gazan civilians who are suffering. But I think that the world doesn't completely understand the situation of what's going on. The world doesn't understand who the hostages are that are being held currently. The original 252 hostages represented 39 different countries. They were Christian, Jews, Muslim, Buddhist, and Hindu. They ranged in age from 9 months to 87 years old. I'm convinced that if they had been taken on October 7th, those 252 people, and were being held in Dallas, Texas, that the world would have shown up the next day and they would have figured out how to get them out. But we're in a neighborhood, in a region that is very complicated and very complex. And I don't think people want to take the time to understand the nuance of how complex and how complicated and how painful this neck of the woods is. So it's much easier to just take one side, black or white, and run with it. And I understand.
So you mentioned hope, how crucial it is. What gives you hope?
I really believe that God is in charge here, and that gives me tremendous hope that this will end in a way that we will have outrageous amounts of work to do. You know, in our family, obviously, we have a lot of help that we will need to get for Hirsch on many levels, on the physical level, on the soul and mental health and emotional and psychological levels, but also in this whole region, we really need real solutions here. This has been complicated for many years. I mean, the irony is that many of the people who were taken from the kibbutz communities on the border were real proponents of coexistence and peace.
How do you pray for Hirsch, and how would you like others to pray?
Well, I pray throughout the day. Jewish people, there are some people who pray 3 times a day. I do it twice a day, the ritualized prayer, and then throughout the day I'm saying psalms for Hirsch in his merit and in the merit of the other hostages being released, praying that all of our leaders can do the right thing, even though that will require tremendous tenacity and courage, because it might not be in their interest to do what it takes to do the right thing. And I would pray that our hostages come home safe and sound. You know, there's still 19 girls being held, young women being held. They're presumed to be pregnant from the abuse that they have suffered. We need these people out now. I think things would move much faster if people actually really did the work that it took and had the courage to do the right thing.
Coming up, brutal leverage, Hamas's war strategy to exploit Israel's concern for the hostages. The release of the Hirsch Goldberg Palin video by Hamas points up the brutality of the war facing Israel. I spoke with John Wagi, our Middle East analyst, about the strategic use of the hostages by Hamas to bring Israel to its knees and force it to negotiate with the same terrorists who celebrated killing Jews on October 7th. John, thanks for being with us. Talk about the hostages. You know, we just heard a very poignant interview with Rachel Goldberg Polin, and so many of these just so poignant, so heartrending. Yep. But on the other hand, there are some hostage families that have a different point of view than Rachel and others.
Right. It's a tough one, Chris, because, you know, I was walking across the street on the way to dinner last night, and there was a mother and a 9-year-old girl and a baby in a stroller. And we were crossing the crosswalk together, and there was a picture of the hostage families. And the girl went up and put her hand on one of the faces. Yeah. This is the kind of thing, it's Israeli credo, l'chaim, to life. Yeah. Everybody wants to spare every life possible. The problem comes when Hamas issues, really, I think, a despicably timed video to coordinate with Passover that shows Hirsch in this obvious hostage situation. And how's his family going to react? Of course, they want everything done that the government can do to bring him out and bring him out now, just like all the hostage families want. Mm-hmm. But there are other hostage families who are saying, wait, my son would never want me to negotiate with the terrorists. That's what's happening here and has been happening for some time.
Right.
So it's a real dilemma. And you know, the government behind all of this has been saying consistently since October 7th that the best way to get the hostages released is to pressure Hamas and not to have this strategy of delay, which is what Washington wants.
Yeah, since the very beginning of the war, there were two main goals: defeat Hamas and get the hostages out. Sometimes they seem competing, sometimes they complement one another, but
Right.
you said the military operation to defeat Hamas, in many ways, some people see as the way to get the hostages. And to your point, I remember interviewing a father of a hostage who said pretty much the same thing. Don't negotiate. My son wouldn't want that. We need to defeat Hamas. That's the way to get the hostages out.
Yeah, and there seems to be a division between which groups the White House and the State Department uses to honor the hostage families, and others who are saying more quietly, sometimes in Hebrew, not very often in Israeli media either, that, you know, I don't want you to negotiate for me. Soldiers have been doing the same thing, writing letters saying, if something should happen to me, don't negotiate on my behalf. You know.
And like you say, Hamas seems to be using the strength of Israel, the love of life, against themselves. It's a strength, but also they're using it as a weakness for Israel.
It's a point that not only Jewish people but Christians around the world should consider that in their prayer time, that there's an information battle going on that's being used as a physical weapon by the terrorists, and just to pray that that will all be exposed down to who's funding all this.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, that's a great point, John. And you know, I know somebody was saying the other day, the difference in, you can say bring them home now, which puts the onus on the government, or let them go, which puts the onus on Hamas.
Exactly, exactly.
And to your point, how can people be praying right now for the hostage families and for Israel right now, a critical time as they're planning to go into Rafah?
Right, there are so many battlefronts. There's the media battlefront, there's the physical battlefront, not only of Gaza, but also of Hezbollah in the north and Iran itself now. So prayer for all those physical battlefronts, and as well in the information war, as the truth can get out, that there's not moral equivalence between a Hamas terrorist group and the Israel government, who's doing everything it can to conduct the war morally and yet achieve their goal, which is the eradication of a group that's killing its own people.
Still ahead, thousands at the Western Wall receiving the priestly blessing. Despite war and rumors of war, tens of thousands of Jewish people came to the Western Wall during the days of Passover to pray and receive a special blessing. And as CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, this year's focus was the hostages and their families.
More than 30,000 people took part in the Birkat HaKohanim, or priestly blessing. They also cried out for the hostages' return and peace for the state of Israel. Jewish people from all over Israel and around the world came to the Western Wall today to bless and to be blessed. This year, they're also joined by some of the families of the hostages.
We came to the Kotel to do the priestly blessing, so we were invited here by the rabbi of the Western Wall to come and hear the priestly blessing and to pass on the power of the blessing that was here today to Eliah and all the hostages that are in Gaza.
In the book of Numbers, God gives Moses and Aaron these words for the children of Israel. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. While the Aaronic blessing is a daily part of Jewish prayers, this public tradition happens twice a year, during Sukkot and Passover. Jewish men believed to be of the priestly line proclaim the blessing. The last collective blessing happened during Sukkot, just days before October 7th. That day, Hamas terrorists wounded and kidnapped Siggy Cohen's son, Eliah.
The prayers that we are praying, they are drawing all the hostages to return to us. And that's the most substantial thing, because only the Holy One, only our Father that is in heaven, can return them to us.
In addition to the blessing and prayers for the hostages, prayers went up for the more than 100,000 Israelis displaced from their homes, the wounded, families of those who died, IDF soldiers, and the security of Israel.
We are praying that in this month of Nisan, that is the month of redemption, when the people of Israel were redeemed, and with the help of God, they will be redeemed again. We pray to God that He will redeem all the hostages, the daughters and sons, will return to their homes healthy and whole, with the help of God.
Rabbi Shmuel Rabinovich thanked God for standing with Israel during the Iranian missile attack. He added, God performed miracles for Israel when He brought them out of Egypt, and Israel must remain thankful. Julie Stahl, CBN News, The Western Wall, Jerusalem.
A unique Jewish choir sang psalms in Jerusalem's Jewish quarter over Passover to draw people closer to God. Here again is CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl.
This choir's songs look forward to the day when the Jewish temple will be rebuilt. The Levitical choir is part of the Temple Institute, which focuses on the Third Temple's establishment, and all the choir members are from the tribe of Levi.
The lyrics are from the time of the temple, and the melodies are some of them new, some of them more ancient music.
There are about 30 members, and choir director Itzik Weiss says most of the music is from Psalms.
The purpose is to establish a choir that we will finally sing all the songs that we're singing in the Bet Mikdash, in the temple.
Weiss tells CBN News they are composing new songs like it says in Psalm 96, sing a new song to the Lord. He says many people are uncomfortable these days with the idea of killing animals to sacrifice in a rebuilt temple, and it doesn't resonate with them. But music is different.
Singing and music is something that everyone can communicate. So our thought was that there's something that everyone agrees that music does good to people and make them to connect spiritually.
And even at this time of war, the goal is the same.
We're trying to make people feel good. That's the only thing we want.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, the Jewish Quarter, Jerusalem's Old City.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And please continue to pray for Israel at this critical moment. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.